Music was always around. My granddad, he plays keys and guitar. He's a reggae artist. He does a lot of gospel. And so when I was little, like I remember being like 4 and him like taking me by the keyboard and teaching me like kumbaya and stuff like that. So it was pretty early on that I was like around music, and then I was in choir. I went to church and I was in the church choir and that kind of thing. But I didn't really get super into my own career until I went to school for architectural technology. And while I was in school, I met some really cool creatives and we started jamming all the time. That's when I picked up the bass, and yeah, that's kind of like when I fell in love. And then I had my first band, which it's called YouTube Comments. All of our lyrics were YouTube comments, and we played like math rock. After that, I moved out here and I had my second band, which is I Tell Blue, and we just tried to like play weird, like rap over weird time signatures. So that was really fun. And then after I Tell Blue, like the pandemic kind of happened, and that's when ebonEmpress was born, and it was like more of my solo thing. I hopped back on keys, and yeah. Actually, my friends, we used to always we call the car ciphers. So we'd like, in the car, the beats just sound so immense. So we'd like blast these beats and we just like rap. And so for years, I was just like freestyling. I decided, maybe I should write some of this down and see how that goes, So it kind of it grew naturally. And then, I don't know, going to school, I never really, a lot of what they offered, the material they offered that was like poetry, I didn't really ever connect to. And so thinking of myself as a poet now was like, it was definitely like an evolution to that space of being like, this is my poetry. This is how I experience myself in that way. It kind of came later on, the evolution of like my spoken word and like rapping and writing. I didn't write my first song down until like 2019, like the beginning of 2019 was like when I first like put pen to paper. I love being in the studio, like it's so cool, and it's definitely a new part of like the experience, and it's something that I want, but I've always just been performing. I want to do it more, and I'm finding when I'm navigating now, it's like in order to, let's say you acquire funding to go perform at other places, you have to have these recordings, or you have to have these numbers, and you have to have all this and all that. So I'm learning how to balance those two, because I definitely feel like I'm more of a performer than a recording artist, even though I do thoroughly enjoy being in the studio. That creative space is really cool as well. It's the healing and the vulnerability. The things that I'm sharing are like straight from in here. It's all the things that I'm experiencing, and I don't sugarcoat things when I'm expressing them. It's like, this is me. And I always find like people come up to me and they're like, thank you so much for sharing that, or I really connected to what you said there. And even if they didn't tell me that, I can feel it when I'm on stage. I can feel that connection and that support that's happening between us. I think I'm most vulnerable is when I'm singing, to be honest. Like singing for me is like, it's like you're climbing up these mountains, right? And then you're like, all right, here's the rapping mountain. And I'm like, I'm feeling great about this rapping hike. And then you're like doing spoken word and you're like, whoa, this is really cool. And I'm sharing a lot, like maybe oversharing, but whatever. But it's cool, I'm still hiking up this. But then singing, I'm like looking at that mountain, I'm like, oh, and I kind of step in and I'm like, all right, let's just get off that for a little bit. And then, so I don't know, for me, when I sing, I'm the most like, oh man, like this is all of me, like everything that is coming out, like in the textures and everything that I'm expressing, everything that I'm really feeling is like happening right now, and y'all are seeing that. And are you seeing it? Oh my goodness. I would definitely say singing for me is the most vulnerable. I've also got really comfortable sharing, so I think maybe that's why poetry. I started the hosting at SoFars as well. Hosting is a different vibe because you're just talking to the audience, you're not performing or doing anything. That's opened me up to like really just talking to people and sharing in those ways. And so did Afrovan, doing a lot of that work. But even now more so with Afrovan, there was always like this structure of like, this is what we're here to talk about and these are the things, and yeah, you're sharing personal things potentially, but like when you're like on stage, it's just like, this is me, like these are the thoughts that are right in my head right now, and I'm just sharing it with the crowd, right? And so that's gotten me a lot more comfortable. Afrovan started because a group of artists were like, hey, like, where can we perform in the city? Like, where are the spaces for our community? Like, how can we connect? Like, we know that there's so much talent here, and we've connected with each other, but there's no spaces for us. And so it came from a pursuit of like, how can we make these spaces for ourselves? Because we're not getting access to the spaces that already exist for whatever reason. So how about we just take a step back from trying to force our way into places that don't necessarily want us and just create something for ourselves? So Afrovan and music were pretty synonymous, especially at the beginning. It's now veered off into something else entirely. Afrovan feels like this thing that wanted to happen. It was in this space and it wanted to happen, and it just was able to be channeled through us. We're doing work from music and mentorship to like Afro-Indigenous gardening practices and like everything in between. And yeah, it's become something very beautiful, and managing it is interesting. Like, just because, like you said, there's only 24 hours in the day. But I have an amazing team, co-founder Core, who's super supportive. And when I think about ebonEmpress and the work that I'm doing, I definitely now think of them as separate things. I feel like maybe before I was getting the building blocks together, and now I'm like organizing them. It's evolved. The conversation has evolved. Like I said, I went to school for architectural technology, so as a project coordinator, I was doing something entirely different. And I was working for Sheridan College. And then when I came here, the experience of this space was so supportive and healing a lot of things that I grew up believing about myself that weren't true. Dreams that I had of like being an artist. I was able to like release a lot of the constraints I had put on myself, or things that I'd watched that put on me here. And I really think that was because of this land, of this space, like walking with this land. I used to run on the seawall every morning and just sit by the ocean and just take deep breaths. I'd go for hikes, and the connection of this land and this space, like being able to be supported by it, has given me so much. And that's why the Afro-Indigenous farming practices and that space of Fair Farms was created in Afrovan, because I was like, this land has given me so much. It freed me from so much of the toxic mentality that I had built up over a lifetime of being in a Black body and experiencing myself in this space. It freed me of a lot, and so I want to give back. And how do I do that? How do I support this land in this space? And so that is like my offering back to this land, and like understanding whose land we're on, and all of those things. That's that space, and that's our offering. A lot of it, I feel like, is it's mostly like what's actually happened on stage. Like, playing solo is cool, I like it, but playing with a band is like, when I get off stage and I think, oh, this was a really great time, it's because of how I felt, how connected I felt, how locked in I felt with the people that were on stage with me. That elevates the conversation from like a good performance to like, oh, that was amazing. Like, that felt so good that we were sharing in that way and so locked in. I am working on my first 4 singles. I'm very excited about them. Just working on the vocals right now. So we should be wrapping a majority of the work by the end of March. And yes, so I'm going to be releasing those and yes, some bigger performances coming up as well. Keeping those under wraps for now. And yeah, what I really want to do, which is past 2023, is I'm planning in 2023 for my tour in 2024. So that's like the biggest thing that's kind of like on my mind, setting myself up for my tour in 2024.